My name's Guy Kesterman. I've been a professional bike and kit tester for over 25 years. And today I'm doing a workshop tech talk through on the new Forbidden Druid. Straight up, as you can see, fantastic looking bike. They're pitching it more as evolution rather than revolution, but there are a lot of detail changes that make significant differences to it. And just to make it more awkward for me to try and remember them all, I've actually got Pat from Forbidden stood behind the camera now. So yeah, if you can hear sniggering and sighing, that's because I've got something wrong, but you know, we'll just have to catch that in the edit. So it's enough of me talking. Let's get in close in detail on this new frame, and in particular the new back end system, what they're calling an inverted 4-bar, and slight variations in their Trifecta suspension system. Right, before we go into the details, let's talk basics. It's still 130mm travel at the rear, but as you'll see when we do the live ride, this is not your average 130mm of rear travel. 150mm fork up front, 65-degree head angle, and seat angle around 77 degrees. Reach now on this large 480mm, 460 on a medium, 440 on a small. But I've already got that wrong because it's actually the sizing is now S1234. Is that right, Pat?
Yes.
There you go. God, this is nerve-wracking having used to. I'm expecting a clip on the back of the head. And also, the thing you've got to remember is Forbidden, genuinely proportional geometry. This isn't a case of the front centre being increased by like, 60 centimetres and the back end being increased by about 2mm. I think rear chain, now I should have had my notes for you. Rear chainstay lengths run from, do you know, I nearly said 423, but I thought that was going to be too short. It is 423 right through to 466. Yeah, I had that. That was the numbers. Genuinely did pop into my head, but that seemed like too extreme. But when you consider, you're getting 60mm difference in reach between the S1 and the S4, that is genuinely proportional. And then other details, BB height is 337, and you're getting shorter seat tubes, particularly on the larger models. So if you do want more reach, then it's easy to size up. Or, if you're running standard reach, then you've got more room for a seat post. Let's do frame detail. Well, remember, none of that horrible, complicated internal headset routing here. Just neat little bolted chips either side of the head tube. Really nice, neat seat clamp on there. And, we'll go into the details of this more later, but the idler has not only moved onto a mainframe mount rather than the swing arm mount, but it's also a different bolted mount. So, before I forget this, the really clever thing is this idler can now be angled in or outwards, so you can change it, basically the chain offset from mimicking a 52 or a 55mm chain line. So it's much more efficient in terms of where it sits on the rear cassette now. And a lovely view of my washing machine in the background. I normally hide that out of sight, but there you go. Laundry has to happen. And other details you have, it's still not super convenient storage. You're not really claiming it's massive internal storage, are you, Pat? Or rather, the Forbidden team. But you've actually got a camera tripod thread on there now, so it's a really lazy thread to get that opening on there nice and easily. Obviously acts as armour, there's more armour there. That'll be rubber on production bikes as well, but there's more than enough room to stuff a inner tube in there and whatever else you want to carry. Right, I've enlisted the help of Cumbria's greatest hand model, Pat here, to get that little protective piece. And then the storage compartment under there. Thank you very much, Pat. Beautifully done. But, they're not overplaying the kind of internal storage thing, which works. That's fine for me because I'd much rather they concentrated on providing a tube shape that rides really well. And as you can see, quite a slim, broad down tube there, and then a very slim top tube. And then you got that lovely kind of vector all the way from head tube down to rear wheel. And if you need to bolt your accessory mounts on, they can sit up there. Full-size bottle on all bikes? Yep. Shock is a trunnion mount. It's a Super Deluxe Ultimate on this top spec bike. And it's a 50mm stroke, and that gives you, like I say, 130mm travel at the rear wheel. Right, just flipped it round to look at some of the detail on the far side. You've got tube-in-tube cable routing on the rear section, well, hose routing in this case. But the neat thing is that's actually a clamping insert there, so it stops any kind. It holds the cable in, it holds the hose in place. There's no sort of sawing action backwards and forwards. And then the front is untubed, but that means you can run the hose on the appropriate side, whether you're a left hooker or a right hooker with your braking. You've got full stainless steel bolt set through here. You can see it's a bearing on the rear. It will be a bearing, won't it?
Yeah.
It'll be a bearing on the shocks of production bikes. This is just a DU bushing on this pre-production bike, and then it's a trunnion mount at the front. So maximum sensitivity through that shock, and new linkages here, which use a full expanding collet bearing setup, and all the bearings for the linkage are now in the linkage, so much more durable, and it's easier to swap those out. Threaded BB, as you'd hope, and the interesting thing about the proportional one-ride geometry is it's not so much the chainstay lengths don't change, it's actually the position of the bottom bracket within the main frame. That's how they make that proportional geometry work there. And if you remember, the previous Druid had what they called a Ziggy link, so you could run a 27.5 rear wheel in there. Now there's no more link option. What you do is you replace the whole real chainstay if you want to run 27.5, because their argument is that people are now kind of, when they first ran the Ziggy Link, that was a lot more of an experimental option to run 27.5. Now it's a more mature market. So if you know that's what you want from the start, then you can choose that straight away with when you order your frame set. And because there's no bearings actually in this chainstay, it is a relatively expensive change compared to a linkage. Just switch out and fit operation for your mechanic or shop. And while we're on this side, it actually makes more sense to talk about the first two parts of the Trifecta setup at least, which is axle path. So obviously you've got the linkage of the base there, but now they've moved to a pivot on the seat stay as well. So it's an inverted 4-bar there, which means that they can modify the way the rear wheel moves. So it's still primarily a rearward axle path. I think it's 94%. There's a tiny slight forward hook right at the far end of the travel, but mostly it's all about that rear wheel moving backwards. That catching a cricket ball analogy I used the first time I reviewed this bike, really dramatically obvious on the trail how well this bike flows through sort of stutter bumps, big hits. Basically the stuff that normally knocks the momentum out of you, this bike just flows through it. But that's the whole principle behind this high pivot forbidden arrangement. But the real difference this new setup makes is that the anti-rise, so the braking effect, really drops away deeper into the travel. So even if you're braking hard, it doesn't kind of stretch the bike out as much as before. So it's less likely to sort of splay and kind of almost drag its hindquarters if you're really heavy and ugly on the brakes. And also the shock rate changes from 2.95 to 2.25 as it goes through the stroke. So again, that really helps give it that bottomless feel. And the shock also has the hydraulic damper option fitted as standard. There's actually a lot of, a fair amount of anti-squat right at the top of the stroke now, which is great for getting a really decent feel of power delivery down, but then it opens up much more easily as you go through the travel. So that's great for sort of steppy, janky horror climbs where this thing will just monster truck up it with no problem at all. And the shock also has the hydraulic bottom out option as standard. So again, it can really use all that travel without just slamming through to the stops. And now we're back on the drive side to talk about idler position, the third part of the Trifecta system. Now, big differences visually you see straight away. There's no lower guard on the chain now because this system allows for more chain wrap, which means it's quieter. There's not that little sense of drag from that solid guard underneath. I know when I was running the Forbidden as a long-termer before, I actually pulled that guide away as much as possible. But with this, guide is completely eradicated. And because the idler is now mounted on the main frame, these 2 points are fixed, so that's a more consistent connection as well. Still got a really neat little chain guard on top there, so keeps it all tidy, and the chain now runs through the frame rather than over the top of the frame. So you've got protection all the way through there, and then, you know, more bounce protection there. So fully damped, fully quiet, but also a more stable, more consistent setup. The other change is, obviously that's moved back on the frame. Previous, you're now getting a steel idler with 18 teeth, and this, you can't see it here, but this is a really fancy, essentially submarine tech bearing with a solid lubricant that the bearings are fully enclosed in, and yeah, there's literally no void in there. So very, very well sealed, very, very durable setup. And again, obviously having it steel makes it more durable as well. Plus, all frame sizes now take a standard chain. So 126 links on the extra large bikes, and then proportionately smaller as you go through the sizing. And as well as being a more compact setup in terms of chain length, there's also less chain growth throughout the travel, which means there's less kickback on the pedals as you go through the strokes. So again, really super keen to get this bike out onto the hill and feel how it rides, because, well, you know, it should be an improvement all the way through. Less kickback at the feet, less effective by braking, but still with that real forbidden high pivot, well, speed generation feel. I mean, I remember riding this bike for the first time on the first generation bikes and just being blown away by how much speed it carried through sections I was expecting to stall on. And if people have noticed, there's a bit of weirdness going on there with that seat stay port for the cabling. Don't worry, that will be painted black on production versions, so you won't be seeing that. And also, if you look up close, you've got a lovely glitter in this black finish. And of course, if you're running Axis like this bike is, you've got a blanking cable port there too. Talking of Axis, this bike is the top spec, so it's running the latest X01 T-Type with the new cassette, new direct mount rear mech, that really fancy new cutaway alloy chain set on there as well. You're getting Lyric Ultimate up front, already said, Super Deluxe Ultimate damper there, and you're getting the rather splendid, one of the best carbon wheel sets I've ever tested, which is these Crank Brothers synthesis wheels on there. This bike is set up as a 29er, but you can buy the bike mixed wheel as an original if you want. And in terms of range, there's a Fox performance bike as well, and the bidding starts off with a GX spec bike. Final bit of spec for anyone who's keen on their control will be delighted to see you've got an Assegai 2.5 up front in Max Terra XO, and then Minion DHR2 in Max Terra XO Plus. And if you're wondering why it isn't sticky, you've got to remember that this is a 130mm trail bike. If you want long travel and complete trail domination, you want to be looking at the Dreadnought. But as it is, this bike coming in at 14.77 kilos. And talking about control, you've also got the new Stealth Ultimate brakes with the lower profile cabling on there, which apparently the big advantage is you can't see it from the bars. But as Pat and I were just saying, if you're looking at the bars not out in front of you, you're probably not getting the best out of your riding. So that's enough about me getting tongue-tied about the Trifecta system. What really matters is how well this bike rides on the trail. So that's exactly what's going to happen next. And stick some pedals on it, we're going to jump in Pat's van and we're going to go riding. So make sure you watch the live ride review of this new Druid. But for now, massive thanks to Pat for dropping off the bike, talking it through with me, and then coming for a ride. Thanks to Forbidden for supporting this video, and my long-standing video supporters, Giro Cycling UK, PT's Products, Crud XL Fenders, Talk Nutrition, Enduro Bearings. This list is getting longer and longer, which is a good thing, apart from my memory, and Hebtroco, who all support the channel, and of course my monthly Patreon subscribers who get extended early and behind the scenes ad-free edits as a thank you for their support, and kind of hopefully they get a bit more information from me in terms of sort of buying support, you know, being able to use my experience, ask me questions, etc. So if you can pony up on a monthly basis, it's only a small amount, but it's very gratefully received. that would be fabulous. But if not, please subscribe if you haven't already, click the notifications and give this video a thumbs up and tell your mates about it as well, because all of that really helps grow the channel. Still consistently climbing the numbers, but the more heads up we can give to people, the better. But for now, I've been Guy Kesteven, talking through a lot of interesting tech on the brand new Forbidden Druid.